Welcome everybody to Staying Home and Making Connections.
Welcome everyone. We are so glad you're here.
Hi everyone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. We're here with you. Welcome to the Virtual Excel Academy. Our session today is Staying Home, Making Connections with Kate Katulak. We're so glad to have you back for part 2 of this Staying at Home series. As you enter our chat window today and our session, we have people from all around the world joining us. Take a moment in your chat window to tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from and say hello. We would love to know who is joining us. And those of you who are at home, there will be moments where I will pause, and that is to allow our speaker today to hear the screen reader. Sometimes it is difficult to channel the difference between the chat and the participant speaking. So I will actually not talk to allow that silence to let Jaws speak to our guest speaker today so she can hear the chatter in the chat box. Welcome, Cyan. Welcome, Emily from Mooresville, North Carolina. Welcome, Mary from New Hampshire. Autumn, how are you? We're doing great. Glad to have you here today. As we also enter the chat window, I have a question for you. What are some things you enjoy doing most with other people? What are some things you enjoy doing most with other people? Talking from Cyan. Playing from Autumn. Eating, laughing. I will give a moment for you all to enter into the chat window what you enjoy doing most with other people. I will pause for a moment, let that chatter come through, and we will close the chat window in about a minute. So get your replies in, and we are actually going to control and close that chat window so that we can control the amount of noise clutter that comes through. In the meantime, let me introduce our hostesses. Leanne from APH.
Hello everyone.
Charlotte from Perkins and Texas School for the Blind.
Hi everyone.
And I am Cheryl Kamahan, it's so nice to have you here today. Please welcome Kate Katulak.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here again today. So again, my name is Kate Katulak and I'm a certified teacher of students with visual impairments. And we're continuing our unit on staying home. As we said, this is the second of 4 lessons. Thanks to those of you who might have tuned in on Tuesday. If you weren't present, that's okay. Today's lesson relates to, but does not build on Tuesday's lesson. So if you're tuning in with me for the first time, welcome, and we're so glad to have you. On Tuesday, we talked about communicating and acting on our wants and needs with everyone at home. It was recorded, so if you didn't have time to listen or you weren't able to tune in, you can still go ahead and check it out. Today's topic is on maintaining connections in the age of social distancing. A few logistics before I really dive into things. As we've mentioned, I am blind and I use JAWS screen reading software. So I have an earpiece in my ear right now, and I'm listening to an outline that I have of our session today on my computer. The reason why we closed the chat box, and sometimes we'll turn it on and sometimes we'll turn it off, is because sometimes I want to hear all of your thoughts and chatter, and other times it would be too distracting for me to listen to what JAWS is telling me you're typing and to listen to what JAWS is telling me on my outline. So I really appreciate your patience as we juggle those things. Again, another logistic is that everyone is muted except the presenter, me, and our facilitators. So feel free to type in your chat box when we turn it on. If you have questions, comments, I love an interactive session and I'm hoping that this will be one. Feel free to have a writing tool with you if you want to take notes or brainstorm as we go through some of the activities today. Without further ado, let's dive into the topic. Again, the topic is maintaining connections during this time of social distancing. Most of us, maybe all of us, are staying home these days a lot more than usual. And when we're in our homes, we have a lot fewer natural opportunities for social connections. During a typical day before social distancing, there were a lot of opportunities that we all have to connect with others. When you get out of your house and into the larger world, you naturally interact with people. During the week, you might get on your school bus in the morning and you interact automatically with the driver and the people riding with you on that bus. Then if you do ride the bus, you get off at your school and you're greeted by people, maybe your principal or vice principal, maybe a crossing guard or teachers who want to welcome everyone and say hello. Those are connections. Also, when you get to your class or classrooms, you are interacting, connecting with your teachers, with your classmates, and also throughout the day, you're walking in the hallways and you're interacting with other staff who work in the school building, or students who might be in some of your classes or in your grade level, or even peers who are in grade levels below or above you. At lunch in the cafeteria, you might be interacting with lots of other people, from the people who serve the lunch, sell it to you, the people who are helping to clean up. There are so many opportunities during our days, especially during the week, if you are in a school, to interact with people. Some of us might have after school activities where we see some of the same or totally different people than those we interacted with during the day. Then in the evenings, think about all the times that you leave your house with your families to hang out at restaurants, go to the movies, go to a park, go to a festival, go to places where there are people with whom you can interact and connect. But now we're staying at home. We're being removed from those environments, and we have to be more intentional. We have to make choices to create opportunities to have those connections and those interactions. The point of today is to help you think of ways to do just that. By the end of the lesson today, you will understand types of connections and why they're important. You'll identify barriers for making connections with a visual impairment during social distancing. You'll learn about strategies for creating and maintaining connections. And lastly, you'll make a plan for creating and maintaining connections. So we're going to open up the chat box, and I want to hear from you. Do you have questions before we dive in even deeper? Do you have comments? Do you have anything that you'd like to share? And I'm going to be listening, and I'm going to repeat back to you what I hear from JAWS. I'm hearing people are raising their hands. And when I hear text, I'll read it out loud.
We are not going to open the microphones up, so please lower your hands.
I would be happy to repeat the objectives. The objectives are, by the end of the lesson, you will understand types of connections and why they're important, identify barriers for making connections with a visual impairment during social distancing. You will learn about strategies for creating and maintaining connections, and you will make a plan for creating and maintaining connections of your own. Thank you for the person who asked me to repeat those. All right, now I'm listening once again to the chat box. And I am listening for any questions. Someone just asked, could you have a virtual interaction during this time? I'm hearing, we hope we'll get back to normal, the way things used to be very soon. I can certainly understand and relate to those feelings. Someone says that they do jujitsu, but it's hard to do without teammates being close by. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments? And again, instead of raising hands, please type into the chat box. One person said they'd love to be back in college. Tammy is telling us about a really cool experience of going to the zoo with the family. That sounds like a lot of fun. I happen to love animals, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to share once again. I already mentioned this on Tuesday, but for those of you who don't know, I'm a big animal lover, and I happen to have a guide dog named Dodger. He's a 2-year-old yellow lab, and I've only had him for a couple of months. He's a new guide dog to me. And I also own a retired guide dog who's almost 11 years old. And she just retired in January. Her name is Hosta. She's a black lab, and she's really, really such a love. I also have a cat who's black, and he is 2 years old. If at any time you hear some distraction from my animals, I do apologize. They are staying at home with me, and they love making noises. So if they say hi, just say hi back and forgive the distraction. All right, well, thank you all for your questions and your comments. We're going to get a little bit deeper into this stuff. To get into the whys and the hows of social connection, first, we need a definition for the term. Social connections are the relationships that we have with individuals or groups of people. The most obvious type of a social connection are with our friends and our family, the people who are closest to us in our lives. But we also experience connections with other people throughout our days. Anytime you interact with a person, that's a social connection. Anyone who plays any type of role in your life, no matter how big or how small that role is, they are part of your network of connections. And our connections come in many different forms. For people with vision, connections can be visual through things like eye contact, facial expressions, and gestures. Sometimes someone with vision can look across many, many feet away from someone, and they can see a smile or a look that they get in their eye, and something's being communicated between them. Connections can also be verbal, like when we talk to people. Connections can be physical. Some examples of physical connections are shaking hands or giving a hug to someone. Connections can be in person, but while we're staying home and social distancing, we're getting a lot less of that right now. Connections can be over the phone. They can be over video conferencing, like Zoom and Google Hangouts, my personal favorite. Connections can be digital, like over text message, in an email, or over social media, which we're going to talk more about a little later in today's session. Connections can also be, and this is going to be a throwback for some of us, connections can be through the written word on a physical piece of paper. I still write letters to my grandma that I type on a computer and I put through snail mail that gets received to her. That's her favorite way of connecting with me. Her hearing's not very good, and so her vision isn't very good either. So she prefers if I write a letter to her and it comes to her in her community and somebody gets close and reads it to her. There are so many other ways in addition to connect with people, especially with technology that I haven't even named, but the possibilities are really endless. And I've heard a lot of people lately talking about being bored and lonely, since we have fewer natural opportunities to get outside of our homes and connect with people. And that got me thinking, but wait a second, there are so many other means to doing this. And I want to talk about some of those possibilities today. Some social connections are deep and they make us feel like we belong. Examples are good friends, members of a community to which you belong, like maybe a church, or even your family is an example of a close connection. Some social connections might be more on the surface level or less deep, like people we interact with each day, but maybe we don't talk to them a lot. Maybe we don't really know their ways of thinking or their opinions, preferences. Maybe we don't know a whole lot about them, but it could be someone we pass by regularly. These could be people on the bus who we don't really talk to a whole lot. People in the school hallway, maybe we know of them, but we don't really know who they are. It could even be that stranger that you cross by on the sidewalk who just says hello. That simple word, one word, hello, that's a connection to our fellow humans. Again, some social connections are more meaningful than others, but having a variety of connections is super, super important. As humans, as people, we are social creatures. We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like we are accepted. In general, people like having a sense of community and that sense of belonging. Think about it in your own lives. What connections do you have? And how do the people you're connected with, how does that make you feel? When you talk to a family member and they're really connecting with you, your thoughts, your beliefs, sharing love with you, sharing opinions with you, sharing acceptance and belonging, how does that make you feel? For me, it feels really good. I love having conversations with my sister, for example. She and I are very close, and I feel like I can say anything to her. So that would be an example of a very deep connection. But I also really love just being out in my community, maybe taking a walk and passing by someone I've never met before and having them say, "Hi, isn't it a beautiful day outside?" Or in the case right now, for me, I'm in Connecticut. It's kind of a rainy day. I'm hoping you can't hear the rain pattering on the window behind me. I apologize if you can. It's actually kind of a lovely sound though. But when I'm out in my community and people who I don't know, they pass by and they just have a very brief interaction with me, that's a connection that makes me feel really good. It feels good to relate to other people. It feels good to have things to talk about with others. And on the flip side, it feels bad when we feel like someone doesn't like us. It feels bad to feel like we're excluded. Have you ever felt like someone didn't like you? Have you ever felt left out of a community, a group? Or like someone didn't want to be our friend? Or like we didn't have opportunities to make the types of connections that we want? I know I have. I think that's a pretty typical experience for every person, whether you're a child or an adult. I think we all can relate to the experience of feeling good when we're more connected and feeling kind of bad when we're not. Without social connections, people describe feeling things like loneliness. And in my next session coming up next Tuesday, I'm going to talk about feelings a lot. It's one of my favorite topics. I think that expressing our emotions, identifying them, being able to put words to them, being able to process through them, understand how they affect others and ourselves, I think that's a really important thing. And it relates so much to this idea of connecting with others because they are so very related. They tie into each other very much. Also, I want to mention, because I love research and I'm a lifelong learner, I have read a lot and I've listened to a lot of things from really, really smart people, like researchers, doctors, psychologists, and scientists, things that have come out from these really smart people saying that there is a link between social connectedness and those feelings that I'm talking about and other important things about our health. Being connected with others leads to mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So if we know it feels good, and we know it's good for us for all those reasons I mentioned, then why don't all of us have huge networks of connections? My answer is, it's hard. It can be really tough to make friends and to connect with others. It's hard for everyone, whether someone is typically sighted, whether they have a disability or not. It's just kind of a tough thing to do. But I know and I suspect that many or all of us, all of you on the call know, that there are some unique challenges, some things that make it even more difficult to make connections when you're blind or visually impaired. So as I mentioned, I am blind, and I've recognized some of the struggles that I have in making connections with other people. When I was younger, in high school, is when I lost my vision. And I was always a really social person. I had a lot of friends. But then when I became blind, I was the only one in my entire school with a visual impairment. And I felt disconnected from my peers. I felt like they couldn't relate to my experience. I felt isolated in the things that I was going through. And sometimes I didn't feel accepted because I was different. And that was really hard. Also, for years, as a sighted person, I had relied on visual cues to connect with other people. If I said a joke, I looked at them and how much they were smiling to know whether I was funny. Or I would see someone who just didn't look like they were doing okay because of a frown on their face. Maybe their shoulders were hunching over. Whatever it was, I was using visual observations to collect information about the people around me, and I was using that information to connect to them. And then when I became blind and I didn't have the advantage of looking at someone, it got a lot harder. I wasn't playing the sports that I once had, so automatically those connections were also lost. In school, there were some games and activities happening in my classrooms that either required vision or required creativity for how I, the only person who was different in that room, could belong and participate. Can any of you relate to that? Some of these things I'm talking about, the challenges in making connections, in maintaining connections, and feeling a part of something. I'm going to turn the chat feature on, and I want to hear from you. Think about some of the challenges you may have in making those connections. And you can think about it in terms of before social distancing. What were some of the challenges that you had before all of this staying at home stuff became a thing? Cheryl is saying that time is a challenge. I agree with that, definitely. Sometimes we get so busy and wrapped up in when is the right time, if any, to talk to people. What other thoughts do you have? There's a lot of support about time. Someone is saying that they work a lot to keep busy, but that doesn't leave a whole lot of time to make friends. What are some of the other challenges? Someone is saying that they're also the only person in their school who's blind. Thank you for connecting with me and sharing that you have a similar experience. Doing jujitsu without someone coaching me, that's difficult. Thank you for sharing. Sometimes it's hard to make friends sometimes.
There was a comment that came through that someone said, seeing where people are in a room.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes I'm in meetings or at a party or at a restaurant, and there's large groups of people, and I'm like, who's in here and where is everybody? That's great. And thank you to the moderators. I love when you're jumping in.
Another comment.
As I'm talking, sometimes it's difficult to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
Another comment from Ryan is, I feel like it's hard to relate to people because my viewpoints are different than that of an average teenager's.
Wow, that's deep. Well said. I think a lot of people can probably relate.
And another comment is getting attention from those I'd like to communicate to.
Yeah, getting attention from people. So when I hear that, I think about wanting to make a friend or even a romantic partner. Like, Hopefully some of you can relate, thinking somebody around you is attractive. Maybe you want to get their number, talk to them on a more personal level, but how do you know if they like you back? Tough.
Sarah says, I find it especially hard to connect with people my own age. Most of the people my own age rely on a lot of visual cues and look at a lot of things. I just don't find that cool or interesting, so I refuse to make friends with them.
I'd like us to talk more about that for sure. Thank you for sharing. We'll take one more comment.
Apsara says, I'm the only blind person in my school, and sometimes it's hard to find the right place to connect with people.
Wow, thank you. These were really powerful statements. It sounds like many of us are on the same page, that making connections, keeping those connections can be really tough. And again, that's for everybody, regardless of whether you have a visual impairment, no matter if you're young or old, and anything in between. Building that social network is difficult. But when you have a visual impairment, there are some unique things to consider, some unique challenges that are specific to being blind or having low vision. I want to mention, as I said, it's hard whether you're young or old. I do want to mention that as someone who has been young with a visual impairment and as someone who's older, not that old, I'm not going to tell you, so please don't type that in the chat box. How old are you? I won't answer. It does get a little bit easier when you're older because people are more accepting of differences. So as I said, I was in high school when I became blind, and it was really tough for teenagers to get it. They wondered, you know, oh, why can't she see? That's so weird. Nobody else is blind. And how did she become blind? And what if I become blind? And they didn't know how to connect with me, just like I didn't know how to connect with them. But when you get older and you really learn more about yourself, and you find strategies that work for you to make those connections, and also other people as they get older, they're a little bit more open-minded about differences, you find that it does get easier. So I hope that offers some hope to you, that while it's hard for everybody, it does get easier, I promise. I have lots of friends now, but as I said, that wasn't always the case. To be honest with you, I'm gonna be very, very vulnerable. When I was 16 years old, I will never forget a moment I had when I was getting ready for school and I was in my bedroom, and it just hit me. I have no friends, not one single friend. And that realization was so painful. I still had some connections because remember, connections aren't always very deep. It's not always best friends and family members we're super close to. Sometimes connections are just people we pass by. But in terms of deep connections, friends, I didn't have any. And I think for me, it was that moment when I realized I'm not okay with this. And I'm gonna do something about it. Because this may come as a surprise, a shock, or this may be old news to you, but you do have power over the connections in your life. It's not always easy to figure out how to navigate these waters, but it is possible to take some control over our social networks and build the types of connections that we want. So let's talk about some of those ways that we can do that. So some of the strategy or some of the difficulties that I mentioned and that I overheard in the chat box, they had to do with regardless of the times. So whether we're social distancing or whether we're going out into the world as always and passing by people and attending school and going to work. But I want to think more about staying at home these times. We're thinking about how to be in these walls confined to our households, or at least keeping a greater distance from people. Because in my mind, that's another challenge that we have to overcome. And again, I'm going to say this a lot, there are unique challenges for people who are blind and visually impaired. Some of the challenges might have to do with just being home. Some of them might be things that everyone can relate to. And again, some of them might be visually impaired specific. My social world is always limited to what I hear around me. Or as I said, sometimes connections are physical. So if I approach a friend, we're getting together for coffee or something, usually we hug, and I love that type of physical connection. But mostly my connections are what I hear, the words people say and the way that they say it. But now that I'm staying home a lot, my social world has become a lot smaller because people are staying further away. I go for walks almost every day, and I can't see the people who are in my community also walking. Usually before social distancing, and if I take a walk, I hear a ton of buzz around me. I hear people with big families or big groups of friends walking around, everybody's chatting. And I'm someone who really loves that type of social activity. I love being around people as they're talking. Even if I'm not directly in that circle, it gives me energy to hear other people's connections, and it gives me even more energy when I am part of those connections. But now people are 6 feet away or greater, and I don't always hear that there are people around me. And that's tough. Also, one of the challenges that has recently come about, I talked a little bit about this on Tuesday, getting access to someone who will guide you is a new challenge that I'm experiencing more as a result of social distancing. If I go for a walk and I need help crossing a street, or maybe I get a little disoriented and want to ask someone which way to go or what street I'm on, people are less likely to come close to me and offer an elbow. People are less likely to come close to me and even give me verbal support. And that can be hard. Some other things that you might have noticed in the age of social distancing is that people are connecting more and more over the internet. A lot of activities that are typically held in person are being moved to the web. Like, I've gotten a lot of emails about museums giving virtual tours. Well, that's great. And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. It's fantastic. But now I am going to be a little sarcastic. Fantastic if you can see, right? I actually did tune in to one of them to see if it would be audio described, or if the presenter, the person giving the tour, would say a lot about what they were seeing. And I've had some success and I've had some disappointments with it. So we'll talk about some strategies for tackling those things as well. All right, so moving on from challenges to solutions. We're going to talk about what we can do to tackle these challenges. I'm a person who really likes to problem solve, to be forward thinking about identifying the challenges, not stewing on them for too long, just making a plan. What's going to happen? So in a moment, we're going to turn the chat feature back on. And I want to hear what ideas you have for creating new social connections until things get back to normal. So the chat feature is going on now. What ideas do you have for creating new social connections in the age of social distancing? You can also type what ideas you have for maintaining connections that you already have. Keep in contact with friends and loved ones, says someone. Very good and important suggestion. Someone says not being the only blind person, so making connections with other people who may be typically sighted. Someone says having Zoom meetings with friends, having similar interests to chat about. Ryan says, this is one of the tips I was going to give later, writing letters to people. I love that. Someone is finding that they are reconnecting with old friends, people they don't get a chance to talk to much. Someone says that it's a good idea to show interest in people and what they're going through. Tiffany says, create virtual events. What a great idea. Mary says that they went to live with their children so they could have more support and connections. Someone says that they're talking more to their sister. It sounds like they recently went through a breakup. I'm sorry, that's a really hard time. someone says they are connecting through online games or using apps. Wonderful. I'd like to take a few more. I think this is so important, and I love the ideas that you're generating. I'll go ahead and share some of the ideas that I've thought of as well. So the phone is a very powerful tool right now. It's great for just calling people. I love that someone said they're calling old friends, people who maybe you just don't have a lot of time to connect with usually. I don't know about you guys, but I have more time than ever. I don't have to worry now about going to catch my bus or commute to work or school or get ready in the morning for as long as I used to. Sometimes literally I can just roll out of bed, hop on my computer, and I'm in a meeting. So that's saving me a lot of time. Use that time to your advantage to connect with other people. Was there anything I missed? I heard some people chiming in from our moderators.
My brother, I was going to say, my brother is in the Navy, so I write him.
Ah, great.
Another person said, showing family how to play blind games.
Ooh. Wow, I'm curious what some of those blind games are. If you'd like to share some of them in the chat box, we'll make sure we read some of them out loud. That sounds really, really cool. Someone says they like to play Uno. That is a really fun game. RS games, yep. Going back to the Uno game, I love Braille cards. And because they have print on them as well, it's something that I can do with my family and friends, whether or not they're visually impaired. Some people play Dice World. Oh, I've heard of that.
Kate, I wanted to mention, one person says that they're talking to neighbors, and that's something that some of us, even though those people are around us all the time, we don't always reach out to them. So I wanted to point that one out.
Thank you. I'm hearing somebody just asked, are you blind? I'm not sure if that question is for me, but in case you weren't tuned in at the beginning, I am blind. I'm totally blind. I lost my vision when I was in high school. And I find this topic to be especially relevant and important in my life because when I became blind, I noticed that I was having a lot more difficulty connecting with people since I couldn't see their facial expressions and so on. And now that we're social distancing, there are some different challenges that I find I'm having. People are having a great conversation about some of the games they like to play. Moderators, is there anything else that that you've read that you want to mention before we move on?
I don't think so. I'm going to turn off my mic.
All right, we're going to go ahead and turn off the chat feature too. Thank you all for sharing. I'm getting some ideas about some games that I want to download or access myself. And that's really what this time is all about, is sharing our experiences so that we feel like we can relate to one another and also coming up with ideas together. So some suggestions that I have, in addition to some of the things that have been mentioned, I heard people are creating more virtual Hangouts through, again, things like Zoom, which we're on now, or Google Hangouts, or whatever it is that you use. One thing you can do is to get creative about what's happening during that meeting time. So schedule a, whatever you want to call it, meeting sounds too professional, too businesslike, but schedule a Hangout with a friend or a family member and think of a theme for that meeting. Some of my friends, we get together every Thursday night and each of us have a cup of coffee, decaf because it's late, and together we do different things. So tonight, actually, the theme is pizza, one of my very favorite foods. And in our own homes, we're all going to have the ingredients to make pizza. And so it's kind of like we're cooking dinner together. I won't be able to see what they're doing, but my friends know that I really appreciate when they describe things to me. So they'll tell me what toppings they're using. They'll tell me when they're setting their oven to put the pizza in. And most importantly, my favorite part, we're going to talk about how the pizza tastes. And just in case you're curious, my favorite is pepperoni, sausage, and mushroom. It's delicious. So I will be making that this evening. But as you can tell, we get really creative about the types of things we're doing. Who would have thought you could make pizza with your friends who might be 100 miles away? I have friends who are on the other side of the country. I have friends who are not even in the United States, who are international, and I can do things with them from my home. I can share with them my experiences, my thoughts as I'm doing them. I can describe to them. If they can see, I can turn my video on and they can see what I'm doing. I think it's really, really fun. I also like to play games. There are some games where you don't need to be physically in person in order to play with multiple people. There are lots of great ideas online, and I challenge you to take this as a research opportunity. Hop online, get on Google, and find out what games are people playing over Zoom, over video chats, because I've discovered many and they're a lot of fun. Now, of course, you can choose to just have regular conversations with your friends over the phone or over a video chat. But sometimes I find you run out of things to talk about, especially as you're not interacting with these people on a daily basis. Like maybe a friend you have from school, because you see them every day, there's always stuff to talk about, endless amounts of topics. But now you're not seeing them each day. So it's like, I don't really have anything to say about school because I wasn't there and I don't really know what's up with you lately. So it can be helpful if you have a plan for how that conversation is going to go if there's nothing really to say. Having a game is a fantastic idea, and just making a plan ahead of time. So at the end of a conversation saying, hey, let's talk about next week. I really want to hang out with you again over Google Hangouts, and what would you like to do? This week we made ice cream sundaes together. Next week, what do you say we play? I'm trying to think of something really clever. I bet you guys have ideas. So let's talk more about that. Baking, what are you having for lunch? What are you going outside and doing? Can you bring your phone with you when you're outside, taking a walk? So while you're video chatting with someone, if they can see, they can observe the nature around you. Or if they can't, they can hear the sounds around you and you can describe to them what you're also seeing or hearing. As I said, I have coffee dates with my friends. What's your favorite thing to drink? Are you a Diet Coke junkie like I am? Well, then tell your friend to pick their favorite drink, set a time, and make a plan. Another idea in this age of social distancing is to sign up for social media. I'm curious to hear whether or not you guys are using social media. So let's open up the chat box and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the social media platforms that you all might be using. I'm a big fan of Facebook. How about you? Do you use Facebook or do you use other tools for connecting with people? The chat box is now open. Let's get those comments coming. King's Messenger, that's one I've never heard of. Thank you for saying that. Facebook, text, phone, someone says. Shannon likes Instagram. Thank you, Shannon. Instagram, another person. Facebook, I'm a fave. Snapchat, Discord. I've never heard of Discord. I've heard of Snapchat.
Discord is a gaming platform often used for discussions.
Okay. Isabella does a lot of Messenger with her friends, especially those who live internationally. That's great. That's good to know. Andrea uses Instagram. Linda, Marco Polo. I've never heard of that one either. I need to up my social media game. FaceTime, that's awesome. That's an awesome way of virtually connecting. Talk, I'm wondering if that's TikTok.
Yes, I saw TikTok above.
Dancing. Okay, great. Okay. That might be it. You guys are supporting each other, coming in with some of the same ones. So that's really awesome. If you are not part of the social media world, I think this is a great time to get on because everybody's connecting virtually. Everybody's connected online. And many of the platforms are very accessible with a screen reader. Personally, as I said, I use Facebook. And I've had challenges with some things like Snapchat. I haven't tried it in a while, but it's picture based. So if you don't have any vision, it might be a challenge. But there's technology that could help you. And in a future session, I'm going to talk more about some of the apps that I use for making connections and other things. But if you aren't connected on social media, I really encourage you to take this time to do that, because not only is it an opportunity for you to get connected, the teacher's going to come out in me right now, it's also a time where you can develop your technology skills. One of my favorite things about learning is that it can be fun and it can be done through games and things that we really enjoy. And when I was first learning to use JAWS approximately 700,000 years ago, it was instant messenger. For some of the older people who might be on the call, like teachers, parents, you may remember AOL Instant Messenger, or AIM as we called it. I literally learned to use JAWS so I could chat with my boyfriend over Instant Messenger. I begged my technology teacher, you have to teach me how to use JAWS because I just want to be able to talk with my boyfriend. I went to a different school from him and I was limited on the amount of time I could spend on a phone. So the computer was my only option at some points in the day. And so I started learning. I learned how to touch type, how to type on a keyboard without using vision. I learned many, many key commands so that he and I could connect. Social media is a great way of connecting. And if your technology skills need a little help and practice, there are many resources online. Additional ideas for connections. I heard somebody say, write a letter to mail someone. As I said, I send a letter to my grandma all the time. You can handwrite it if that's something you do, or you could type it on a computer, or if any of you know, if you are a Braille reader yourself and you know someone who also reads Braille, they might really enjoy getting a letter in the mail that's in Braille. If you have access to a Braille writer or an embosser, type them up a letter and start sending letters to each other back and forth. I love getting things in the mail. I think most people do. And you can actually send things to people that you know they would like. That's a way of connecting with someone from a distance. One of my very best friends, she takes a bath every night. It's her way, getting home from work, settling in and relaxing. It's her time. And I know that about her. And so when we were just a couple weeks into social distancing, I sent a care package to her that I ordered from Amazon, and I just had some bath bombs sent to her. And I included a little note that said, happy Wednesday. For no particular reason other than wanting to make you smile, I'm sending you this gift of bath bombs. I hope you enjoy. And it was just a small thing. It didn't cost a whole lot of money or take a lot of resources or time. It was just something I did to brighten her day. And whether you pick a gift or something special to send someone, or you write them a letter and you send it to them in the mail, don't we all love getting things that we can open, see who it's from? Makes me smile for sure. You can also be sure to go on walks with people in your household. Somebody mentioned that they're connecting with their neighbors. I really love that idea because it might sound strange. How do we connect with our neighbors if we can't be within 6 feet of them? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I got a pretty loud voice and I am not ashamed to shout. So if I'm out on my porch and there's a neighbor across the street who's also out on their porch, I can maybe get a little bit closer to them, but keep my distance and we can have a whole conversation. We can even schedule time when we're purposely around each other. So I might say, hey, just saying, Saturday, I'm gonna be in the front yard planting some flowers. If you happened to be outside at that same time, I'd love if we could just continue a conversation. Now, when I'm on walks, I mentioned this earlier, I usually like to hear the busyness of people walking by. It's something that makes me feel good when I hear families together and I hear friends chattering, and I'm getting a lot less of that. So at first on these walks, I was feeling a little lonely. So again, being a problem solver like I am, I thought about what do I need? What I needed was to feel more connected with the people in my community, even if I can't see or hear them. So I identified a solution. And that solution was, if I go walking with someone in my family or someone in my household, I ask them to describe to me who they're seeing, what's around me, and what's happening. So now my world has been opened up. Even though I'm not making verbal connections by talking with these people, and I'm not making physical connections by being close to them or being able to hug them or shake their hands, I'm still connecting with them by knowing what they're doing and kind of their role in my community. My sister, who's the person I walk with most often, and my nephew, who's 9 years old, they're the people who most frequently tell me about the mailman that they see walking around delivering letters, about the twins in the stroller who's being pushed by a mom and a dad who happen to be dressed in identical outfits, and it's so super cute. And even though I don't know exactly what that looks like, having that information is really joyful to me. And maybe you would enjoy doing the same thing. When you go out on walks, ask questions to get the information that you're curious about. If you want to know who's around, if you have someone who might be able to describe that, ask them to. Ask them, how many people do you see? What are they wearing? What are they doing? What are their facial expressions like? Are they smiling? Do they look happy? Do they look sad? That might help you feel more connected. So it's one thing to talk about ideas, which we've brainstormed a lot of ideas thanks to you. You had a lot of great suggestions and strategies of things that you have done or things that you might do. But we need to go one step further. Now we need to make a plan. We need to make them a reality. So we're going to take just a couple minutes and we're going to create an action plan. So we've gone through tons of strategies. We've gone through tons of ideas of ways to connect despite social distancing. And I want you to choose one of those that sounds realistic to you. Choose an idea, a goal for connecting, or a strategy for making a new connection or maintaining a connection that you already had. And either write it down or think about it in your head. To quickly review some of the ideas, you could set a phone meeting or a video chat with someone. You could play a game from a distance. You could make a plan with a family member to go for a walk. You could write a letter to someone. Haven't mentioned this yet, but you could find a pen pal to connect with, either somebody at your school or someone you don't even know across the country. Which strategy, which idea sounds fun to you? Which one would make you feel more connected to people? And once you have chosen that idea, that goal, that strategy, write what resources you need to get it done. If you're going to be writing a letter, do you need a Braille writer? Do you need a computer with a printer? Do you need a bold line pages or a marker? What do you need to make it happen? If you're going to be having a pizza night with your friends or in a virtual chat room, you need the supplies for pizza. So far you've identified your idea, your goal, the fun activity that's going to happen to get you more connected. You are writing your resources that you need to make sure it happens. And then think of some other details to make this plan a reality. When is it going to happen? Tonight? Tomorrow? On Saturday? Every week? Is it an activity that happens more likely in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening? When we think of timing, we also want to be mindful of other people that's going to be part of this activity. I'm on Eastern Standard Time. Other people might be out on the West Coast and there's a time difference. Or if it's international, you really want to be aware of what time it is for them versus what time it is for you. Who will be part of this activity? It's one thing to just think, I'm gonna have a pizza party with my friends, but you gotta make a guest list. And if you're not really sure who to connect with, ask for help. Ask for a parent or somebody else in your house to help you brainstorm, who could I connect with? What resources do I need? What's the best timing? ask these questions. You can make these plans for lots of goals, lots of ideas that you might have. Again, I wanted you to start with just one today, because for me, I know that I do best when I'm able to identify one thing that I'm going to change, one thing I'm going to do differently, one solution that I have. And once I follow through with that, once I've made a plan and I've made it happen, then I start having confidence to get outside my comfort zone, identify more things, and get a little creative. Now, hopefully you have identified some things that you want to do to connect with other people despite social distancing. Hopefully you've either made a plan or you've started making a plan, or you've made a goal to make a plan for how those things are going to happen. I want to take the last few minutes to answer any questions that you might have about the things we're talking about, but feel free to ask more personal questions. Last time on Tuesday, people were asking me things like, do you have a guide dog? What's it like being a blind adult? You know, just different things that I'd be happy to answer. So any questions that come to mind, let's get them going in that chat box. Remember to type them in instead of raising your virtual hand. Grace, thank you for the compliment. Grace said I'm a good teacher and good person. I appreciate those words. Very kind of you. Someone says, how do we connect with others? Is it through a video call or something else? That's a great question. If we have the technology to connect over video chat, that's one option. And I do encourage people to turn on their video when you're doing a video chat, even if you can't see the other person. If they can see you, they might like being able to see you. But I've also noticed that for the people who are sighted, they are more likely, in my experience, to describe things when the video is turned on. So I've missed some of the statements coming in.
One question was, do you use voiceover?
Great question. Thank you. I do use VoiceOver. I have a Mac laptop where I use VoiceOver. I also have a PC, which I'm using now with JAWS, and I use VoiceOver on my iPhone.
Another person asked if it was safe to send mail, and I am going to include in the certificate email both the address for APH and for Paths to Literacy, because we read Braille. So if you don't have someone who can read Braille, you can send us the letter and we can read it.
I love that.
Kate, another question is, what do you like to use on social media? What do you do on social media?
When I'm on social media, I like to send messages to my friends. My preferred platform is Facebook. I love it when people put descriptions of pictures that they post, even though I can't see them. If they find it worth sharing, then I find it worth hearing about. So I really appreciate it when people just describe, even if it's just in a few words. I also like just posting updates from time to time. Some people will post updates all day long. They'll tell you what they had for lunch and what they're thinking about and what they're doing. My posts are a little bit less often. I like to post when I think a lot of people would like to hear. So I might post a reflection that I have on a Netflix movie that I've watched. Like when Bird Box came out, I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to engage with that, but it was controversial in the blindness community, and I had a lot of personal thoughts about it, and I wanted to make them public. So I used Facebook as a platform to share my opinions and perspective.
Kate, there are so many more questions, but since it's time for us to end, maybe we'll say goodbye and then stay on the line a little bit to answer a few more if you have a couple more extra minutes.
I do. I'm so excited by these questions, and I really enjoyed being here today with all of you. I hope you'll tune in next Tuesday, the April 14th, where we're going to be talking about some of our feelings and processing through how our emotions are affected during this time of social distancing. I look forward to chatting with you all more then. Take care, everyone, and be well.
Kate, thank you so much. What a wonderful session. Thank you for sharing your stories and just giving us some very uplifting things to talk about and think about at home. I wanted to just add, I loved that you like to send letters, and even hard copy Braille letters would be so much fun. So there is a really wonderful picture activity that you might be interested in doing that is in Braille for those of you at home. I'm going to post the link in our chat box right now. And it is a session that we had, I believe it was last week or maybe earlier this week, called Fun with Braille. And in that session, you can draw a picture. And it would be so much fun if you could send that picture to one of us or to one of your loved ones. And it's about in the middle of the video, so you can fast forward it to about 20 minutes or so into the video, and you can do that picture activity in Braille. It's a lot of fun. So there's one way that you can connect with others by sending that picture. And that was, again, with Tammy Raisman, and it was called Fun with Braille. And so I put that link in the chat window for those of you who are interested in doing that. A couple of announcements. We are still in need of pictures. And by that, I mean like actual photographs. So for those of you who do social media and you have a couple of fun pictures of yourself doing fun things that you like to do, like playing Uno or maybe using your computer or your Braille note takers or a magnification device, whatever it is that you do at home, we would love to see what it is you're doing and have a photograph of you doing that. And you can send that to Leanne and she'll post her email in the chat window so you know where to send that to. And what we're doing with those photographs is we're creating our slideshows. We have a one-page slide that we have with each of our sessions, and we're looking for some photographs to post on those. So please send that to us as you can to lgrillet@aph.org. lgrillt@aph.org. A couple of other announcements that I've been sharing throughout the week for those of you who are TVIs. There is a really wonderful coffee hour that is happening Monday, Wednesday, and Friday through TSBVI Outreach. So I will put a link in the chat box about that for those of you who may be interested and available to do that. And lastly, one last announcement, APH is also putting on some wonderful webinars on Wednesdays. And Leanne, if you want to just chat a little moment about that, that would be great for our folks at home to hear. You are on mute.
Sorry about that. We have a street crossings without traffic control webinar. It's a 3-hour webinar. It is built for certified orientation and mobility instructors, but others are welcome. And we already have 500 people that state they're going to attend, and so we have made the room open to 1,000. So please feel free to join us. And we also have a Braille Trail Reader webinar coming up next Friday, and that's for the beginning level of Braille Trail Reader and how to connect it and kind of get going, maybe on social media like iPhones or iPads.
Thank you for sharing. That is so many great resources to have. For those of you who are available tomorrow, we have a really interesting and special session for our birth to 3 population. We will be discussing infant massage at home. So if you know of any early start folks, early childhood folks, or any specialists who may be looking for some things to do at home, maybe some families that have some very, very, very young infants, please share this link, and we hope to see you back next week. Kate will be back, and our schedule is posted on Paths to Literacy. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you again, Kate, for just a great session. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
So there are